Good day, welcome to For Bloody Honor, the Russian Civil War Review. It can be found in issue 37 of Against the Odds magazine. This is a simulation of the Reds versus the White factions for control of Russia in the years 1918 to 1921. It is a 2 to 4 player game. If two players are playing, one player controls all the White factions, the other player controls the Reds. If 3 or 4 players, the Reds is controlled by a single player and the remaining players split up the factions between them according to the rules. This is a chip pulling game, which easily lends itself to be a solitaire game. For Bloody Honor is played on a map mostly of Russia, with one area being Poland. The map is sectioned into 23 areas and labeled by a major city in that area, for example Moscow and Kiev. The map also has a Trans-Siberian Railroad and spurs running through some of the areas. An area will also have a political influence point value assigned to it, ranging from 2 to 8. White faction units are color-coded. For example, here's a check counter denoted by a maroon slash and a Denikin denoted by a blue slash. The Reds are just that, they're red in color with a yellow slash. Units have a combat factor number printed on them, either a 1 or a 2. This represents how many die or dice are rolled in combat. Victory is determined at the end of turn 10 by who has the most pips or political influence points. It is the Reds total versus the total of all the combined White factions. In a 3 to 4 player game, and the White faction wins, then the single White faction that has the most pips is declared the winner. An area is controlled when it is solely occupied by the Reds or the White faction or factions. Here the Reds have control of the area Kazan, as well as the pips, which is 6 points. For Bloody Honor has 10 game turns. Each turn represents 4 months of real time. Each game turn is broken down into 3 phases. First, the Baltic Treaty phase, second, the activation phase, and third, the political control phase. The Baltic Treaty phase doesn't start until the 7th turn and really is a quick die roll to determine still in the game or has successfully gained its independence. It can no longer be counted for pips, and the area is off limits for the rest of the game. So really the game essentially consists of 2 phases. Activation phase consists of pulling these chits from an opaque container. The Reds have a move, a recruit, and a combat chit. The White faction each have a chit for movement and share a recruit as well as a combat chit. All these chits are put into an opaque container and simply pull out one chit and perform that action. Two move chits have to be drawn before a combat chit can be activated. Movement is not guaranteed. You have to successfully roll on a movement table to move. Regular movement allows you to move 1 area. Using the railroad allows you to move up to 3 areas if the path is clear of enemy units. You can move up to 3 forces out of a single area. If units want to move from area, units are pinned for movement. You have to leave a force behind that is at least equal to the same number of units the enemy has. In this case, the Reds have to leave 3 units behind and are able to move 2 units out of this area if they are successful on their movement table. Combat is voluntary. When the Red combat chit is drawn, then all the Red units may engage in combat in a contested area. If a White chit is drawn, then all the White factions may engage in combat. Simply add up all your combat factors for your side and the total number you get to throw. There's a very specific rule for the White faction that brings to light the lack of the ability of the White factions to be coherent with each other. For each White faction over 1 in an area, subtract 1 die for the total number of dice to be used whether attacking or defending. In this example, the Reds roll 4 dice and the White faction can only roll 4 dice as well. All the results are simultaneous. 6s are hits, and for most units, there is not a step reduction. Eliminate units to satisfy your opponent's hits. Players may decide to retreat after the first round of combat, starting with the attacker. If retreat is chosen, there's a possibility of defection of a retreating unit. Recruitment chit allows you to bring in new units from your recruitment box. You roll on a chart and modify your die roll by your current faction's modifier level and add 1 for every 10 pips your faction currently has. These units are placed in areas controlled by your faction, except the Polish or foreign units. They have specific rules that they are only allowed to bring in recruitments. So replace stepped units are selected from the eliminated boxes. Compare how many pips that faction has to the replacement chart, and this gives you the number of units that return to the map. After the last chit has been pulled and activated, then is the political control phase. This is when you adjust your pip marker on the track to reflect your current total of political influence points. All the modifiers are reset to 0. Next turn begins and repeat steps until the end of turn 10. So what do I think of the Russian Civil War game for Bloody Honor? I like it. There's a few reasons why I like it, and I'd like to share that with you. First of all, I find the topic intriguing. I don't have a lot of exposure to it, so this is a great way for an introduction to that part of history, for that part of Russian history, and how dramatic and dynamic it was. The rules are very refined, very crisp, easy to go through. The player aid sheet that you get, the 2-page player aid sheet, 80 to 90% of everything you need to know is on here, even the starting forces. Very simple, very easy to use. So you're only referencing the rules very little throughout the game, and it's for very specific situations like the Baltic Treaty phase. And unfortunately on the map or on the turn track it is not recorded right. It shows it starting in turn 1, but actually the rules are very clear that it starts in turn 7. Definitely not a showstopper or it takes away any enjoyment of the game. Just a curious fact thrown out there. More of the characterization or the flavor of the game for the Russian Civil War is in the first turn in Odessa, Kiev, and Minsk. There's German occupation markers here that you're not allowed to enter that, but that's quickly removed after the first turn. So there is some good reflection on the history of it. Like I said, I don't know everything about it or a lot about it, but I can see how this game does reflect it as well. The foreign units, I like how they're even labeled for UK, USA, France, Canada's even in there. And then the Japanese that they have to specifically enter Vladivostok when they do come in. It's a good game. It's so good that I was inspired to do a game review, my first game review on this. I don't know why I let it sit on my shelf for 3 months or 3 years, sorry, but it was just last month that I decided, you know what, let's take it down. And the 2 people that I've exposed to it, they really took to it and they were able to run with it and play the game. It was more about playing the game than it was learning the rules. So if you have the opportunity to try the game or pick it up, I recommend it.